It's very important to be humble. The one mistake I used to make is comparing. So people have a tendency of guilt trip, putting you on a guilt trip, and sometimes it works because you feel like, oh my goodness, I've sold out and what have I done? You know, you go that route. And my mom always has something to say, is like, grow where you're planted. She's like, you were always a nomad. For me, it's actually something amazing knowing that you've sat in one country. Because my brother works for the World Food, and for him, he's like 2 years
everywhere.
Alone, Iraq. So she says it gives me a place like my heart rests, because then I don't have to get new numbers, new whatever. So it's something.
Time zones, trying to understand your time zone.
Yeah. So people guilt trip you. So it's learning to give them the right responses, to say, just because I have doesn't mean the DNA Uganda is not running through me. It does run through me whether I like it or not. And, because you're away, people don't realize you talk more about Uganda than you did. Like one thing I actually told myself, that I felt so guilty that I had not traveled to many places in Uganda. And I said, I'm going to be a bit more deliberate to say, this time I'll go beyond Mbarara, I'll go further. I'll go beyond Kabale and go further. I'll go beyond
Karuma Falls.
Like go and see and expand yourself also to love your country, because I expanded myself in Zimbabwe, but I didn't do the same thing in Uganda. So that guilt that sits with you every time. And I used to wonder why my brother would go and the next thing say, we're going to Vic Falls, we are going to Ginger, we are going to Dara. That father over, I'm like, what are you doing? We are tired, we want to see people. He's like, you have no idea that when people ask me of a place, I feel so guilty because I haven't been there. Like imagine how many people ask me about that corner where we have the gorillas in Uganda. I'm not been there. Yes, and it pains me. So that's a target I'm saving for it. So those are some of the cons, because and people then ask you questions like, so are you Ugandan if you only know Kampala, Jinja, and Mbarara, like only the major cities, or Fort Portal, or, so that for me, it's also a growth point, a pro and a con, because with the con is the guilt of I'm not Ugandan enough because I'm just lost in one context. But then also the determination of I'm going to learn more about Uganda and understand my history. And the one thing I've been doing, I've been attending, it's called the School of Leadership. Intentionally, it's in Uganda, but I'm attending it intentionally because I started finding myself getting disconnected from home. The longer you live away, that disconnection happens without you realizing it. So people were like, you just come back from masters and you're tired of going to school. And I'm like, when I was in the US, it made me realize one thing, because my roommate was a Ugandan. She would say, Connie, why are you writing a paper on Zimbabwe? Everything is on Zimbabwe? You should write about. She was so emotional about it. Then I told her that you're forgetting that I work in Zimbabwe.
And I'm also like, Zimbabwean.
Yes, and I'm resident. So I'm like, for a long time, my first master's, all I did was write about Uganda. Then one time my professor called me and she's like, Connie, when is this going to stop? Like, when are you going to embrace that you're Zimbabwean now? When are you going to do it? And she's like, when are you going to let yourself make friends? Because she's like, I'm tired of sitting through the classes and like, you can understand this, you can understand this. Like, are you going back? Are you going to work in Uganda? Like, I understand if you're working for a regional organization. So it struck me. That was the first person who got me out of this Uganda bubble that I had built. So it's a con and a pro. We get so fixated on home so much because we miss it that we forget to see what's there. So it's a balance. So for me, I take it both as pro, both as a con, but also an opportunity to grow. And that also helps family and community and Ugandans generally to understand. And I like the fact when you said you should write your story. Just digressing a bit, because people always wonder, they're like, you people who are 40 and 42, 43, you don't seem to be in support of change or whatever. But we also sit in a place of fear because we jumped bodies, we saw bullets flying over our heads. So people need to also understand our context to say we saw stability growing up, and the fear of by a whim like that, we could go back. I remember, I don't know when I saw the violence in Uganda, like my husband phoned me I was walking.
I think like it was last year, November. Last year, November, when there was shooting.
Yes. And even just the recent ones, because each time that happened, he found me rocking, then he's like, is something wrong at home? And I'm like, yeah. Yes. Then has it brought back the trauma? And I'm like, yes, because now I'm thinking, my sister's kids, my brother's kids, I don't want them to see what I saw. So that's also another thing. You any small thing, so someone at home might not see it, but for us, we feel every little. Like if someone says, there's a car that blew up, you'll be scrolling through social media to make sure that people find, even if you know that this happened in Ginger, you call everyone, even someone in Fort Porto, you know, but people don't understand where we're coming from because you feel, and the media, the way the media reports it, Uganda. So first of all, you go media,
that's it.
Then understanding comes later. Then, like for me, the bombings that happened, I called everyone, and I know friends who don't even work in Kampala, but I was calling, are you okay? Are you fine? Are you good? Are you, you know? So, yeah, it's that thing. People at home wouldn't understand. I'm sure you did the same thing. People wouldn't understand your frenzy, but it's also coming from that part of anything that happens home.
And for me, in my case, it's that Japan is 6 hours ahead of UG. So I am very, very awake before Ugandans are awake. So by the time anything happens, I'm like, I've already picked my day and I'm slowing down. So I am more alert on A or B when Ugandans are waking up. So I am, I can see, I can communicate faster. But just to add on to the guilt you're talking about, perhaps the other guilt is sometimes people don't understand that you understand their pain even if you're not there. They'll just say, are you just saying that because for you are away from there? But sometimes I tell my friends, I might be away, but if those roads are not well constructed, my parents, my siblings might have an accident on that road and they might lose their lives. So my concern is not superficial, you know. If they're talking about hospitals, you know, if there's something that's not going well with the health institution, I am genuinely concerned. Your family, my family might be affected. We might be victims. So, you know, they make you feel like, when your concern is just superficial, you don't understand what's happening. But actually, it's guilt that you can't do anything. Perhaps it's also guilt that sometimes you might have it better, you know better, and you're wishing better for someone, but you don't have it in your power to do better for them. So maybe it's not survivor's guilt, so to speak, but there's that kind of guilt that you feel that people might think, you're just showing off. But actually, it's very, very genuine. It's really, really genuine. So I'm glad you brought that up because we don't talk about these things a lot, but they do happen. And just, you know, to go off a bit, I read Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime. And there's somewhere where he says one of the guys in the townships got a job in one of the malls somewhere, you know, like how you can get a job as a shop attendant or a clerk in a really fancy place. But every time he would go back home, his people would make him feel guilty. Oh, so now you're working uptown, you think you're better than us, you think you're cooler than us. The guilt ate up that young man so much, he quit his job. You know, he was on his way out of the townships had he stayed his course. But because of the guilt, because of feeling like you're no longer fitting, your own people don't make you feel like you're fitting in, you make the choice to fit in and just cut off everything else that's been happening. So, I just wanted to bring this up to show the different angles of guilt that we might face. And hopefully, whoever is watching or listening can, be more kind. Be kind to the people who are, walking away from home, because it's a real struggle. It's a real struggle. And as we wind up, I'd like to ask you for tips or advice, for someone who wants to take that leap. Especially the part about adjusting, because I think for many people, adjusting, like you said, for a very long time, your papers were about Uganda, yet you are in Zimbabwe. So adjusting or even taking that step because you left home 15 years ago, you were still young, and most times families are not forthcoming with youngsters taking that leap. Maybe these days things have changed, but it's even just as an individual deciding to up and leave, especially, I think we're a bit biased. If someone talks about a European country, family is not very, they're like, okay, you can go, but another African country, that's a whole different story. So what are some of the tips or advice you'd give to someone who wants to take that leap?
So for me, the tips, one is do your research and do it well, because all African countries, just like Europe, just like America, have immigration laws that we need to follow. And just to explain that we've been having an influx of Ugandans who come into Zimbabwe, get arrested, and they're put in jail. And people are like, but it's an African country, how does that happen? It's very important that people know that you need to fulfill particular laws, because it happens in Uganda. We also have like lots of people who are stuck in our jails around immigration-related violations. So that's the first one, because it helps you settle in a country better. Because when you are not an illegal immigrant, it makes your life easy. And this is not that I'm speaking from a place of privilege. I know there are people who might not be able to do that, but it helps a lot because it also opens up a whole wide of protection for you when the governments know that you're in a country within the proper structural systems. Then secondly is open up your heart a lot and because when you go into a new space, you're as it's like a child that has just been born. So if you come with this arrogance of I know, just come and humble yourself. It's very important to be humble. The one mistake I used to make is comparing. We compare a lot. You'd say, oh, Uganda has very nice apples. Oh my God, I'm about to. Oh, this. And it builds a barrier between you and the people who'd like to open up because then they say, okay, go home. Like, go home already, So it's knowing, that's emotional intelligence, knowing when to share your frustrations about a country, about tastes, about flavors. We don't know how important those things are until you step away, and then your palate has to learn to deal with another different taste of milk, a different taste of vegetables, a different
bananas.
I am bananas, that's a big one because we had a tendency to eat and like, so everyone is watching you. But be emotionally intelligent and say, okay, I'm going to eat it and celebrate Uganda at the back of my head and say, my goodness, you've got the best bananas in the world. You've got the best apples in the world. You've got the best, whatever it is, and appreciate the best that is being given to you at that moment. It helps with adjusting because you will never find a replica of Uganda unless you look for food markets. And that's why maybe it's important for us to open up a bit so that we can have those food markets so that you can access them. Because I won't lie to you, Muruj, I eat Ugandan food when I go to the US. I am 3 countries away from Uganda, but I go and I eat fene, I eat gonja because it's coming from Latin America, not even Uganda, but Latin America. But it's because they are the equator.
It's close.
The equator, yes,
the
but the
foods are
equator,
close.
yes. So there's also that. Then find a community. I know you did talk about some community members might not be very welcoming because of also they carry the baggage of the dynamics at home.
Yeah.
But finding a community is very, very helpful, especially if you find someone that you resonate with. They will help you be able to navigate that country because they've been there, and appreciate the fact that they've been there earlier than you, so they will explain to you certain things.
Yes.
And you won't make mistakes because they've already made them for you. So it is really very helpful.
But perhaps
the other thing
also add on to that aspect of community, you should also use your gut instincts, because as much as you might be going out to look for community, not not all community will work for you. Not because people are mean, but because perhaps you guys won't even share the same values, you know?
Yes.
You may not share the same values, you may not see life in the same lenses. They might be into totally different things that you may not want to associate with. So as you look for community, you should also use your gut instinct. If you feel someone is off, then perhaps chances are that person is off. That person is off. So as much as you might be like, but this is a Uganda, but if the, for example, the Liberian feels more like home, then
yes,
go with the Liberian if you feel the Ugandan is a little bit off. So just to add on to the aspect of community.
Yes, and also to say that because you're in predominantly also a very racial dynamic, which is different, you find that because we are in African countries, we do not intentionally look out for a Liberian. I will not intentionally look out for a Tanzanian. I'll not intentionally look out for someone else. Of course, when I went to the US, I saw the value in looking out for those communities. But because I was here, we're all black skinned. I didn't. The difference was looking out for the Ugandan community. But that's a good idea because I've been wanting to set up a book club that's Afro, because I was in an Afro-Caribbean book club in the US. So it opened me up a lot because I was like, we're so similar and we're so different.
Yes.
So it is helpful. But also to maybe just state that this is something we always talk about in the Ugandan community, that we do understand that there are different communities. Yes. There's the ones who've come in legally and whatever, so you find that everything will also resonate from a value perspective. And there's also people who do not even want to show up on the radar. So I do understand that dynamic that you're talking about. So I think for us, we were really privileged that a lot of the community here were professionals. So the value system was the same. And those, you find that when the value system is not the same, you slowly fall away. You sense, like you said, you sense and you're like, I'm not gelling with this person. So let me find like my out in this relationship, and you don't pursue it aggressively. So it's also that exercising your intuition and making sure that it taps into that. But the other one that I wanted to recommend, and I know depending on which context someone is in, because I came from a church background. I was raised in an Anglican church where actually I met like Daniel, who introduced us. We used to attend the Alpha courses at the university, Uncle Ben and all of that. So the first call of port for me, every country that I go to, actually I tell people I visit 3 places: the library, so that I understand place, and the museum, so that I understand the history, and then I go to church. So in church, I was placed in a cell group, and the woman I was given, because they explained to her she's a foreigner, she's looking for a community. So she was like a hope for me. So where you're saying people need to evaluate, should come and turn, and she says, Connie, I did not feel too good about that person, and I don't think you should pursue that relationship with that person. Wow. Or when she was like a buffer for me, and unfortunately we lost contact, but for me, she really helped me a lot. she actually introduced me to someone who was my age mate, who then introduced me and then introduced me. So church for me is always the first place to be able to get to know others. But if you're not a church person, just going out, because like in Zimbabwe, we have this little magazine, it's called the Deipi magazine. It's like, hi, I think in Swahili you understand Deipi, hi. So it gives you like, if you want floral arrangements, go. You'll meet people interested in things you're interested in, but it's pursuing based on your interest aggressively so that you build those relationships, or game clubs. Like we've got here quiz night. You find that you can develop real, like, lack of a better word, dope relationships, because you've got an interest in quiz or reading. So you look out for those. It will help you settle, because there's always that one person who says, you're Ugandan, let me take you along here, and they help you, because then they will be almost like your sponsor in a country to navigate the cultural terrain. So if it's not church, find clubs, look out for a magazine that will tell you where to go. And for me, that's one thing that I found really helpful, because when I had to go to the US, my sister came to live here and help me with my children and be with them. So the first thing I told her, get in the AP, go to the gym. I introduced her to my gym, and I told her, go to church. She didn't like my church for some reason, so she didn't pursue that, because she said they were speaking in Shona, so she didn't continue with it. But with gym, she found community, because she's an aggressively health conscious person. So then she found friends where I didn't find friends, because for me, gym was in there and out of there. So I didn't build friends. Therefore, I should stay and should. So it's gym, church, art. Art helps you follow people, like
even volunteering.
Yes, volunteering is also like volunteering in homes. But I found that in church is where I found, even in the US, the first place I went to was church, which then helped me volunteer. And then I did find a lot of people. But volunteering generally, because maybe let me state, some organizations are a little worried when they don't know you. So if you go there, it's difficult. Yet church offers those opportunities. But Rotary is a very good place to start. Toastmasters is another very good place to get in, because when you're speaking, you meet people, you build community around there. So it's very important for people to look out for those. But now I don't know, for people who are really, really quiet, like
introverts, extremely introverted people.
Yes. So, because when you go in a new country, you have to get out of your shell. It is very important, because it's very easy to get depressed, very easy in a foreign country, because you don't have community. I remember the first time a friend of mine had just moved to Botswana. I had moved to Zimbabwe. I called her and we cried, and I'm not lying, for 1 hour. We cried. We want to go home. And my mom could not hear any of that. She's like, live through it. You wanted to go experience your nomad experiences, because you turn around and it's scary to build new relationships. It is scary. So she's like, step out, be silly, because I was cautious. I don't know if you were cautious, but I was cautious of my accent, because each time they'd say, oh, you're not Zimbabwean. Where are you from? You know, that question literally like rattles you, because already you're like, they've othered you immediately. So when you other,
they have put,
like, how do I not other myself from that space? But then I learned, I was listening to this program, and this Latin woman was speaking in a very heavy Latina accent. And she said, when I just come here, I used to be so cautious of it, but now I've owned it. And I found myself where I own it. And people are like, where are you from? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm Ugandan. Then we have a conversation around that. Yet when you've just stepped in, you're guarded, and you feel like, why are you othering me? But other is not bad, actually. It's just that people are curious, and tap into their curiosity by telling them about the beauty of country and the beauty of their country, not what is bad. Because what we do is we then
criticize.
You're like, hey, your food, your what? Yet you should sit down and say, woo, I'm so glad to be here because I'm testing new flavors. Then you open up to people. Or I'm curious about this. How do you do it? We do it this way in Uganda, but I'm curious. So then
the
people also
packaging.
the packaging of your and discomfort should be packaged in form of curiosity. But for me, it came by learning because I was like, everyone, I'm sure you did the same thing by complaining about the toothbrush and ordering it from home. The ghee, because I used to love my ghee. I found here it was bland. I'm like, what is this? Like, instead of saying, this flavor is different, I will bring ghee from Uganda
and I'll show you.
Yes. So you see how it's different from I can't even eat this food. Like I have to order everything from home. So for me, that's like some of the tips. And also appreciating the currencies, the context, and listening out. I used to tell people that the first year, 6 months in Zimbabwe, I was like a deaf person. You know, the deaf people sense. Like, I don't know if you experience it. You sense. Like when a different language was spoken, I would use all my senses, not my hearing. I would look at someone and I would know what they meant. So people always wondered, but I just adopted that skill to say, like you said, be cautious if you're safe or not. So that for me was one thing. And along the way, I saw that it died, but it was reactivated when I was in the US.
I guess it's a fly or flight kind of survival mechanism for you, for any human being anyway.
So we get into that. So tap into it. So your intuition is at 100%. Your ability, because now you're deaf to language because you can't hear it. My children always say when they hear me on the phone speaking to my sister, that what is that you're talking about? But that's exactly how we hear. Like the first time I came, I used to hear because Zimbabwean's Shona is D or Z. So I used to hear Z. So I'll tell myself, so I'll calm myself, read lips literally. They'll say, oh, you said that, or hear the word in the context, because a lot of the words they're actually the same, some of the words. So I would say, oh, that's Swahili. Like someone would say ngombe, I'd say, oh, that's a cow. Mbudzi. I'm like, that's what we call it in Soga.
That's a goat.
Yes. So then they're like, how did you know? Then I'm like, no, that's actually how it, then people start seeing resonance between, and then they also open up. So for me, those are the tips of trust yourself and trust the people around you in a way that you appreciate their culture enough to open up for you to get into the fold. Because in African countries, what will be different, but for you it's different because Japan has its own language. It will be very different.
And its own culture.
Yes, the bathing of very hot water, I've read about that. I hope it stopped, but I read about it from someone. I'm sure it's not, and the food and seafood, which I would struggle to eat though.
I have not recovered. You know, this whole food business is. I am still learning.
I know we all do.
Yeah.
Yes. So a friend of mine, a friend of mine came and visited. So my husband insists he's going to cook for him. So I didn't want to say that this is a Ugandan coming. I know the flavors they want because the flavors here are bland, like no garlic, no. I'm not saying for everyone, but at least generally it's a very bland taste. I was like, we put kamulari, we put garlic, we put a bit. So if someone comes and they're like, nice, but I know what's going to happen. So when he cooked, you could see like my friend was like, oh, seafood, no, fish, no, is it tilapia? Like I knew because you've lived it. So yeah, so it's just something as a by the way, but I realized I was like, he's going to be like a fish out of water. He's come for a short time, but you do not cook for him flavors. He doesn't know unless you've specifically said this is going to be
on
a
the menu.
Zimbabwean dish that we are offering.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. I completely agree with that. Yes, so Connie, thank you so much. Once again, you need to write a book, because as you said, perhaps people in your age group have experiences that me, they're really different. As I say, we just hear about some of these things, and perhaps you also don't understand your context because there isn't a lot of people talking about what you guys saw, what you guys had. It's There isn't a lot of you making noise, so you need to you need to come out and tell us more of your story, not only because of the era within which you were born, within which you grew up, but also your whole experience, as an African working in a different African country, and now you've been there 15 years. That is a lot you can share with the younger ones, and we can all learn from each other, because right now, as I said at the beginning, there's Agenda 2063, but that's not going to happen if we are not contributing our voices to the agendas. I mean, as much as, just like in any country, just like in any institution, if a leader is making a decision and they're making them solely from their lens, that becomes very complicated to eventually integrate everyone. And we're looking to integrate the continent. So the more we have these conversations, the more we have these stories, I think it will make integration, it will make Agenda 2063 much easier for all of us. I mean, these visa things, these immigration things, these food things, these, I don't know, guilt tripping things, all the, language related things. We actually recently did a podcast on language. Whoever's listening to us, you should check it out. We had a brother from Angola, from Mozambique, and one from Guinea. Guinea Conakry. It was a really eye-opening conversation, even for me, because there's a lot we need to learn about each other as Africans. And thank you. So, Connie, thank you so much. I hope we'll have more conversations about different other things. As I already said, the reason why I started all this is because I feel we're not having enough conversations among us as Africans.
Yes.
We have conversation on the international tables, but not among ourselves, and we need to have more of that about different things. For example, you're into human rights, I'm into transportation. However, as outside that, there are other things that connect us. Language, you are growing into better people, into better professionals, and developing our collective work. Yeah, so Connie, thank you so much for taking up your time. I really enjoyed this. I really did. I wish I could continue, but I guess I'll just have to contact you for a different conversation. To our listeners, thank you so much. We'll catch you next time on the Big Local Podcast. Until next time, bye.
Bye.
Connie, thank you.